Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is Crime Time with Connie and I am obviously Connie. If you are new here, I sit down every week and I talk about a true crime case. If that is interesting to you, please hit that subscribe button if you want to see more of my videos, and don't forget to like the video. So today's case, we are going to talk about when a prank ends in a tragedy. Spoiler alert, was it meant to be a prank or was this full-blown premeditated murder? That is the big question that I think I know the answer to. But first, I want to say sorry. I want to give an apology because lately my videos, you could probably tell something's been off. I have been really sick. And I've also been dealing with a lot of personal issues mentally. For those of you who don't know, we lost one of our daughters in 2020. So if you dealt with losing a child or anybody, you know that grief comes in waves. It could last for seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks. I wasn't myself for a while. I am human, and I do want to show up and give 110,000%. And lately I feel like I haven't been doing so. And for that, I am truly sorry. But I've been feeling a lot better, you know, taking it day by day. And today's a new day. And today is a new case. So we are going to dive right in. And thank you for listening. And if anybody is struggling with grief, I just want to let you know that you are not alone, and I hope everything will be okay. On February 8th, 1972, Nancy Wyckoff, a student at the Oregon State University, was found deceased in her dorm room by an apparent stab wound to her chest. 5 weeks later, a male student came forward confessing to her murder, alleging that it was an accident, that it was just a prank gone wrong. Now, before I talk about the murders, I want to talk about who Nancy was. Nancy's full name was Nancy Diane Wyckoff. She was born in 1954, and she grew up in Glendale, California. She loved to ride horses and go camping. A lot of people would describe her as the all-American girl. They also would describe her as very trusting and very intelligent. In fact, that was the first thing a lot of people would bring up about Nancy. She was apparently really, really smart, and she knew it. They also would describe her as confident because she knew that she was very smart. She took Russian while majoring in mathematics. In fact, she never missed a class at Oregon State. She came to the university in 1971, and her dorm room was room 333. So that means it was on the 3rd floor, and she had no roommates during this semester. I did not go to college, so I do not know how the dorms and how often you get them, I don't know. Her dormitory was co-ed, meaning that boys and girls lived there. I found a news article detailing about Nancy's dorm room, and I thought I would share that with you guys. That way you can kind of take in what kind of person Nancy was and what she enjoyed. It described her room as having plants everywhere. She loved plants. It was filled with driftwood and seashells on her bookshelf and her desk. She even had a poster of a cartoon frog saying "Kiss Me" on it. Over her bed were handwritten poems that she wrote. She enjoyed writing poetry. It seems like all the things she treasured in her life was represented in her room. Like I said, she took pride in how intelligent she was. She was very passionate about education. Her mathematics teacher said she never missed a class. So when she failed to show up to class that Tuesday morning, he knew, and everybody knew, that something was wrong. And sadly, he was right. Nancy was found in her dorm room by her hall chief after hearing screams and banging and sounded like pacing back and forth around 3:45 a.m. earlier that day. Now, her math teacher did not get word about what happened to Nancy, but eventually he and the whole campus would find out that that day on February 8th that one of their students was brutally murdered. This sent everybody into shock. No one knew who would want to hurt her. She was very well liked, and it was said that she did not have any enemies. Nancy's murder created sheer terror on the campus. Students were already on edge because hours before Nancy's murder, the campus actually tightened security by having a curfew and putting locks on the doors leading into the dorms. So the outside doors had locks on them, and you had to knock. Someone would come and grab you and take you to your room because something crazy was happening on this campus. 2 attacks had happened to 2 female students prior to Nancy's murder. The first one occurred 5 days before Nancy's murder. An 18-year-old female freshman was about to enter her dorm residence, and her dorm was at the Sackett Hall. She was beaten on her head with a piece of concrete. She was, of course, knocked unconscious. She woke up. She saw what she described as a small man with dark hair. He tried to pick her up, and she thought this was just a robbery. So she was like, "Take my purse." And that was not the case. He went to her neck to strangle her, and she screamed. This frightened the male, and he ran off. Luckily, this woman was okay. The second attack, which I found out both women's names, but I didn't want to say them. I won't give the full names, but the second attack was on a woman named Connie. And if you don't know what my name is, that is very similar to mine. It is my name, so it freaked me out a little bit more. So Connie was attacked 2 days before Nancy's murder, and she was an 18-year-old female struck also with a piece of concrete. And in the basement, I guess that's where they kept a rec area with refreshments. So she went down there, and dude who she saw, short with brown hair, hit her in the head with a piece of concrete. She fought back, and she actually broke her finger during this altercation. So campus security told everybody, lock your doors, and you have a curfew. Now, we can't 100% confirm if Nancy knew of the attacks, but she was the secretary of her dorm council and associate editor of the Resident Hall publication, which is just the campus's newsletter. And of course, the campus newspaper is on top of these stories, these attacks. Nancy's mother would come forward later saying that Nancy, quote, she poo-pooed the idea of locks. And that's what her mom, Claire, said. And so Nancy was not a big fan of locking her door. This was the early 70s, and a lot of people just didn't lock their doors. They felt like they didn't need to. One of Nancy's friends came forward later saying that she visited Nancy the night of her murder. She came into her dorm. The door was unlocked. She came in, left her a note, and when she left, the door was unlocked. So police did not know if Nancy's murder was connected to the 2 prior attacks because The first two attacks, very similar. Nancy was just found stabbed in her dorm room. So police don't even know if this is the same man. Like I said, Nancy was found by her dorm's hall chief. This was a female student. This female student said Nancy was alive when she got there, but she was clinging on to her life on her bedroom floor. By the time paramedics arrived, Nancy would have no pulse, and she would be pronounced deceased. And an 8-inch carving knife was found right next to her body. According to her autopsy, which was performed by Dr. William Brady, who was the Oregon chief medical examiner, he said that the knife was 6 inches into her chest. The blade severed one of her ribs. It penetrated her heart. It struck the left lung. There was also a deep neck wound, an injury to her left shoulder. There was hand cuts, which means that these are defensive wounds. She tried to protect herself, maybe even fight back, but there was no evidence of sexual assault. Back at her dorm room, investigators are trying to piece together what happened and who could have done this. The Salem crime lab technician swabbed the doorknobs, attempting to find any identifiable fingerprints. This ended up not leading to any suspects. Weeks would go by, and the mood of the campus remained tense. Oregon campus was known to be very safe. In fact, this was the campus's first murder. The campus was about 105 years old, over 15,000 students, 400 acres, and her dormitory was 5 stories with 265 residents. The campus was safe, and now it's not. And a lot of people thought, who was next? Men formed patrols, male students. They helped women walk to and from events. They would carry baseball bats or golf clubs. Women went around carrying mace. Some students reported attacks happening to them, but they were hoax. The first one was 2 days after the murder. A 20-year-old male said someone tried to strangle him with wire. Cuts were on his neck, but it turns out that he slashed himself with razor blades. The other hoax was a 18-year-old female said she was struck in a bathroom. 2 days later, she retracted her story. Now, the 2 confirmed assaults that happened prior to Nancy's murder, they are still unsolved. Now, a big question is, was the murderer a student? And if so, he's still on the campus and he is still working. Investigators would interview all of the dorm residents, but they would zero in on one person, a 17-year-old electrical engineering student who lived on the 2nd floor just below Nancy. His name, Marlo James Buchanan. He came forward to investigators after seeing a flashlight in the school's paper. Now, this light was at the crime scene. In fact, apparently it was a weird-looking flashlight. Police hoped someone would identify this flashlight, recognize it in the newspaper, and in fact, it did work. Someone came forward. I guess this flashlight was one of a kind. It was rechargeable and came apart in half. Marlo came forward the next day after the newspaper was published with the picture of this flashlight. And he, quote, said, "I think the flashlight is mine." Turns out it had been identified by another male student. This male student threatened Marlo to go to police or he will. He knew the flashlight was Marlo's. Marlo told the police that he lost the flashlight and he had nothing to do with Nancy's murder, but the police were not buying it. Marlo, he was a top-notch chess player, and he was actually the school champion in high school. His father's name was Marshall, and they lived in a well-to-do suburb in the south of Portland. Not much else I could find about Marlo and his upbringing, except for the fact that he grew up in a stricter household, that he never talked back to his parents, that he looked to just be a kid. He had a baby face, that he was well liked, he was kind. All around, everybody thought he was a good student, and he was very smart. He did have a excellent GPA. I think it was 3.8, but don't quote me on that. Now, ironically, but not really, the carving knife that was found next to Nancy's body, that was the murder weapon, yeah, that knife matched a pair of knives that came in a utensil set that Marlo owned. And what is odd about this utensil set is that he bought it 3 days prior to Nancy's murder. Now, he's talking to police for weeks, and after 5 weeks of talking to investigators to try to get the smoke off of him, he is confronted with all of the evidence against him, and he broke down crying. He explained that he did do it, but it's not what you think. That he was just trying to pull a prank on her, and he accidentally murders her. So with this confession, District Attorney James Brown is gonna seek an indictment on him for charges of Nancy's murder. Because Marlo is 17 years old, he will be under the jurisdiction of the Benton County Juvenile Court. Going back to the flashlight, more details about the inconsistencies in his statements. Earlier in a session with the investigators, he said he threw away the adapter in the toilet, he threw it away, so he kept changing his story about that. Back to Marlo's confession, the investigator told Marlo, I don't think you want to go through life with the death of Nancy on your conscience. And Marlo was reported being shaky and that he was crying. Harris, the investigator, told him, do you remember her scream? And that's when Marlo proceeded to nod. Marlo's next statement was, I went up to the 3rd floor to RF. Why did I take that damn knife along? Now, if you're curious about what RF means, like I am, apparently it means to rat fink. I guess back in the day that means to pull a prank on. So I will not be referring it as rat fink. I will be saying prank. He said he went for a walk around 10:30 p.m. the night before. He was on campus for about 30 minutes. He went back to his dorm. He had no roommates. Around 3 a.m. he woke up and he decided to pull a prank on a girl. So he took smoke bombs, matches, flashlight, and a knife. He didn't specify why he took the knife or matches, but said it was a part of the prank. He then went up a flight of stairs, began trying doors to see if they were on lock. The first one that opened was a friend of his named Carrie, and this was actually a former roommate of Nancy's. Now, Marlo was fond of Carrie. He liked her, and she was a nice friend, and he felt like he didn't want to pull a prank on her. So that's when he closes the door and tries the next room. And that room was Nancy's. Marlo said when he opened the door, he saw a female laying in the bed asleep. His knife at the time was in his pocket. He went to the woman's bed, placed the knife on the floor, and he did this because when he would kneel down, he didn't want the knife to stab him. He knelt down beside her bed. When he did this, he placed the flashlight balancing on his knee. When he got to the floor, of course, the flashlight was off balance and it fell on the floor. And that's when Nancy woke up and she was obviously frightened. She threw the covers off. She began screaming. He said she tried to fight back, and that's when he stabbed her 3 to 4 times. And that's when he ran to the fire escape door at the north end of the hall. He fled up the fire escape fled down the fire escape to the second floor where his room was. He went to his bedroom, he undressed, and he tried to go back to bed. Marlowe's defense attorney asked the judge for permission to waive their client's right to a jury trial. If he is tried in juvenile court, he would receive a closed hearing and a max penalty of confinement in juvenile detention faculty until he is 21 years old. And the judge agrees to have no jury. So all of the evidence, witnesses, only the judge will hear from them, not a jury of 12 people who will decide his fate. And he is tried in juvenile court. During the opening statements, the defense they're like, yes, he confessed. He did kill her, but it was just an accident. The medical examiner took the stand saying that the stab wound to Nancy's chest would have been caused by a great deal of force, and that she would have not been able to live longer for 2 minutes after that. Multiple students took the stand saying that they did hear Nancy scream around 3:45 a.m. that day. They also said that they heard the pacing and the running and pounding from Marlowe during the attack and him escaping afterwards. Experts would come forward saying that Marlowe's maturity level was somewhere around 12 years old. The defense's psychiatrist testified that him playing pranks was how he showed anger. Another defense psychiatrist said he had repressed his unconscious sex drive and he was a, quote, schizoid personality with the potential of becoming psychotic under stress. The prosecution psychiatrist believed he suffered from a personality disorder rather than a mental disease. During most of these testimonies, it was said that Marlowe would sit still. He never moved or even shifted in his chair. A professor of psychiatry at the Oregon State University Medical School in Portland testified he was probably psychotic at the time during the murder, but not before or after that. But he only examined Marlowe for an hour and 15 minutes. So he only based his findings after spending minimal time with Marlowe. He said that Marlowe was not psychotic, but had a pattern of psychotic behavior building up over a period of time. That these pranks that he wanted to pull were not compulsive, but I'm sure the killings itself was. He said Marlowe seemed polite, intelligent, quiet, and they described his upbringing a little bit more, saying that Marlowe helped around the house a lot, that he had a strict Baptist upbringing, which left him having extremely high ideas of how to live life and how to act, and gets angry with others who do not live up to his high standards. He also goes on to say that Marlowe was extremely intolerant of his sexual desires, that denying them almost completely. He went on to say that dropping the flashlight was the trigger that released the gunpowder, and the gunpowder itself being his anger and his sexual desires. Now, Nancy was not sexually assaulted, and it seems like he did not get to what he really wanted to do to her out of panic, and maybe he felt like he was going to get caught. On May 22nd, 1972, Marlowe was found guilty of manslaughter. The judge, quote, said, "Despite your emotional condition, this crime is something society cannot condone." Now, you're wondering, during the testimony, during this trial, is anyone going to talk about why he brought a knife to Nancy's room? Well, I thought the same thing, and we were all hoping that we would find answers. But sadly, The question of what part of the knife was the play in this practical joke was never explained in testimony. Maybe, in my opinion, because he probably wasn't trying to even play a prank, that he allegedly was the one attacking female students on this campus, and the first try didn't go well, the second try didn't go well, and he was getting fed up with him failing, not living up to his high standards, and he brought a knife the third time, and he was gonna do it in a bedroom where he thought he wouldn't be caught. Marlowe had a maximum sentence of 10 years according to Oregon state law. 2 days later, the youth was placed in the Oregon State Correctional Institution because of his age, and it was his first time offending. He only saw the psychiatrist once since he entered the institution. The only time he saw the psychiatrist was during his initial psychiatric diagnosis. Now, the president of the, not the president, one of the head people of this place said, "We only have funding for only 8 hours of psychiatric services per week. Those 8 hours are spread among the 476 inmates. Our psychiatric services are extremely inadequate." And I agree with him. Marlowe would be up for parole after serving 5 years out of his 10-year maximum sentence. And guess what? On October 18th, 1976, Marlowe was paroled from prison, only serving 4 years. 4. For confessing to murder, even though he got a manslaughter charge, which just tells you a lot about the system. I understand he was only 17 when he committed the crime, but the fact that everybody believes that this was a good boy and he made an honest mistake and that it was just a prank. It was, in my opinion, obviously not a prank. I'm glad he confessed because he probably, in my opinion, would have probably committed more attacks on women because, in my opinion, again, I feel like he was the one attacking women on campus. And it seems like the attacks did not happen anymore after he left. But sadly, this campus would come across a serial killer. In fact, probably the most famous serial killer of all, Ted Bundy. He visited the campus, and that's where he murdered a student named Roberta Kathleen Parks. And she was a resident of the Sackett Hall, which was across the street from Polling Hall, where Nancy lived. And I don't know what year this was. Let me see what year this was. I don't know much about her case, but so far from what I can gather from just pulling up about her, she was abducted from the campus and he took her. It says he murdered her in Washington on May 6, 1974. She was Bundy's 4th known murder victim. Again, Ted Bundy murdered a lot of women, so we don't even know if that number is accurate. Going back to Nancy's case, it's so unfortunate, a loss of innocence. Nancy could have been someone that could have changed the world. She was very intelligent. She was majoring in mathematics. Who knows what she would have done in her career? She took pride in her education, and it's unfortunate. As far as Marlowe, I cannot find any information about where he is now, if he's even still alive. He probably is. He was a young kid when this happened. But it's just unfortunate and sad. I don't believe this was a prank. Very sad, very tragic case. I want to know what you guys think. Do you think this was a prank or was this premeditated murder? That is going to be it for today. Let me know what you guys think. I will be back hopefully this week with spooky stories. I know, no offense to my husband, the ones he's given me, they're not really that spooky. So maybe I'm just gonna have to find some, because I like to be surprised when I'm reading them. But maybe I might. He and I have different levels of spookiness, because he's a scaredy cat. It takes a lot to freak me out. But don't get mad at me if I'm not here on Thursday with spooky stories. But hopefully I will be. So yeah, I hope you guys have a good Easter. I gotta get ready for the Easter bunny tonight, you guys. So that's gonna be it for me. As always, I hope you guys stay safe out there. Please. And as always, stay golden. Got my shirt on today that says so. Alright, see you guys soon.